Hey everybody, welcome to another episode. Today's chat is with Melbourne Rebels and Wallabies rugby player Reece Hodge. This was another chat from last year and we sat down with Reece while he was on the mend from surgery. We chat about his career and how quickly things can change. Between last-minute call-ups to play for Australia, through to injuries and lockdowns slowing things right down. There's two things that stand out for me in this chat. First, Reece has a really simple, low-key approach to maintaining positive mental health, which we love.
If I'm ever feeling lonely or, isolated or anything like that, I think it's just as easy as, messaging in the group chat and asking a couple of boys if they want to go for a coffee or lunch or dinner or whatever. And I know for me that makes a huge difference, just to have people around and just have casual chats and casual catch-ups. And maybe after 30 minutes of having coffee with someone, they might feel comfortable enough to actually share the way that they're feeling.
Second is his consistency. Here's an example.
One massive thing for me that I was actually going to mention before is I usually stretch for probably 30, 45 minutes before bed, every night.
Huge.
It's almost like a sleeping pill for me now. I'll do it, kind of get the piss taken out of me when I room with people on tour, because they're like, what the fuck's this guy doing?
Such a champion. Huge thanks to Reece for this one. Please enjoy this episode of the Men of Words podcast, where the little conversations can make the biggest differences. I'm going to go and have a little stretch, I reckon.
Reece, yeah, absolutely humbled to be in your presence, mate, and have a chat with you today. We're very, very grateful, and kind of silver linings, I guess, to a recent injury is that you've got the time to be able to sit down and have a conversation with us today, mate. So yeah, thank you firstly for coming on board.
Thanks for having me on, guys. It's obviously been a bit of back and forth over the last few weeks to find a time that works for both of us, but it's good to be finally on here.
Big time. We're it's probably a nice place to start because you're back home at the moment in Manly, so we might even use that as a bit of a launching pad and go back to the early days of yourself and your football life and your personal life. And I guess, maybe the best place to start is who are you and who is the real Reece Hodge, maybe?
I feel like I'm better at answering questions than going straight off for a spiel about myself. But no, I guess, Northern Beaches local, pretty standard kind of upbringing. Back in kind of Manly is that you live a very active life, and I was lucky with my upbringing that my parents were always very supportive of very active lifestyles. Played pretty much every sport growing up, and did nippers like surf life saving, and was always near the beach or out in the sun, kicking a footy around or throwing a ball or whatever. So I'm very grateful to have grown up here on the Northern Beaches, and I feel like it's really shaped, I guess, who I am as a person and probably my values. And I guess for me, being near the water and in the sunshine is very much a part of who I am and what kind of makes me happy. And I guess it's kind of what I come back to if I'm ever in a bit of a rut. So I guess my upbringing's definitely shaped the person I am today. And as you said, obviously a bit of a silver lining of the recent injury is that I've been able to come back home and catch up with a lot of mates and a lot of family, extended family that I haven't really had the chance to see properly in quite a while. So, yeah.
That's awesome. And so obviously, as we were saying before, you're having spent a significant amount of time in Melbourne now. So how long have you lived, I guess, in Melbourne since you've been sort of based down here?
So I moved down to Melbourne November 2015. So what's that, about 6 and a bit years now. So, the first 4 years probably spent a lot more time than 2020 and 21.
Probably a good call.
Obviously COVID's kind of played a bit of havoc with the old living situation down there the last couple of years, especially with our kind of international and interstate competitions. So I've actually missed it, and I'm actually looking forward to getting back. I'm actually coming back down next week to move house from Port Melbourne into Richmond, so into the Richmond bubble, and get amongst it a little bit more. And I'm definitely looking forward to next year, I guess, getting back into that cafe culture and hopefully a bit of nightlife and stuff like that. So looking forward to it.
I'm curious because I guess, I guess there is quite a lot of people that have had the opportunity to live in both Sydney and Melbourne, and it's obviously the rivalry in Australia as far as city v city. And it's it's one I'm always super interested in with people that have had kind of extended experiences there. How would you sort of give us a couple of pros and cons of each, or where do your allegiances lie, even after a fair bit of time in Melbourne?
Look, it's always a controversial opinion, this one, but no, I think I always say to people, I think Melbourne in the city, like as a city, is better than Sydney. I guess in Sydney, you kind of have people tend to kind of stick in their areas. So if you're from the Northern Beaches, you stay there. If you're from the eastern suburbs, you kind of stay there and everything's there for you. And the Shire, the kind of same. Whereas Melbourne, I feel like people kind of, get amongst the city and Chapel Street and Richmond a little bit more, kind of no matter where they're from. And, the culture and the vibe of actual Melbourne city is probably more so than city in the city in Sydney. But I guess for me, it's always pretty hard to beat the beach and the weather and the kind of vibe in Manly, especially. So I always say Manly is probably above Melbourne for me, but Melbourne would be above Sydney if I was living in the actual city. So there's a diplomatic answer for you.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, well played. The politician in you coming through. It's awesome. No, honestly, I don't think I could agree with that answer more. I think every single part of that, it's the same thing, because I guess from people that are Melbourne through and through, just the born and bred Melburnians, it's kind of like, oh, I can't live in Sydney, one-way streets and no vibes in the city, all the rest of it. It's like, yeah, but like the beaches, city beach culture, we just don't have that the same as it is up there. And they're just next level.
Warm year round.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Ask someone in July and everyone's like, fuck Melbourne, no way. It's absolutely rubbish.
That's what I always say to people, though, is I guess with our schedule, I usually get kind of, I guess, December, January through to sort of May, June in Melbourne. And, you got Australian Open, you got kind of January, February, which are the hottest months of the year. And the summer vibe in Melbourne's always awesome. So, I mean, that's probably what's kept me down there for so long, and hopefully for a few more years to come. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Fair enough. It's probably, it's an interesting point you raised, like growing up in Manly, and, I suppose as Melburnians, rugby in general, rugby league, rugby union, whichever kind is not probably the number one followed sport in Melbourne, or sports. So for us I love league and looking at Manly's got such a rich history in rugby league. So I'd be interested to know in how or when the decision for you was to go for rugby union, or did you play league growing up and then make the switch, or have you been union since day dot sort of thing?
Yeah, so for me, I was kind of just playing whatever my friends were doing from an early age. So for me, it started at kind of age 4. I played soccer for a couple of years. And then kind of my family, like uncles and dad, like all kind of played rugby union growing up, never at a high standard or anything like that. But I guess we're always just a rugby family. So I started that in the under 7s. I guess played a bit of soccer and union. And then I got to, I think it was like age 11. And then I was playing league on Saturdays, union on Sundays, because that's kind of what my mates were doing. And then actually dabbled in a bit of AFL as well when I was kind of 13, 14. And that kind of replaced league as my Saturday sport. And then kind of got to a point at age sort of 15 where AFL changed to Sunday and it clashed with rugby. And then, I was like I just had been playing it longer and was probably better at it just because I understood the game a little bit more. And so I just kind of stuck with rugby. And that was winter. And then I also had cricket in the summer. So I kind of was in the kind of the junior academy stuff with cricket. Was I probably at that stage probably preferred cricket a little bit more, if I'm being honest, to rugby union. But was probably just a little bit better at rugby, and kind of got to the point where I had to make a decision. I think it was my last year of school where there was kind of like a full-time, might have been like a $5,000 contract or something like that for rugby coming out of school, and was playing grade cricket at the time, and kind of had to sit down with the cricket coaches and say, look, like I've kind of got this opportunity for rugby, and nothing of that kind of same level had been given to me in cricket. And that was kind of my decision from there. But I guess I loved a lot of sports growing up. It wasn't always like rugby above the others. But I guess just the fact that my family had kind of grown up with it and we're always a rugby family probably had a lot to do with it as well.
The PE teacher in me is just like cheering because of the amount of sport that you've got going there.
This is your dream. You would have loved this kid. You would have loved little Reece Hodge in PE class. And like, don't worry, just pass it to Reece and he'll go.
No, it's interesting. I didn't know that AFL was in there, and I suppose that it might tie into how good of a kicker you are, and like you've got such a good punt on you that. Do you think that all those obviously helped benefit your rugby anyway, and so obviously the opportunity arises to go into a bit of a full-time mode? Of course, you're going to jump at that opportunity. Absolutely.
Yeah, I guess I'm a big advocate as well for kids. Like, I know there's like that whole debate around sport specialization from a young age, and you don't kind of develop the full range of skills. I'm massive. Like, if I have kids down the track, I'll be just whatever you want to do and as many sports as you want to play. I mean, as long as we can drive them to it down the track. I was lucky. I was an only child, so mum and dad were always kind of at my beck and call with driving me to sport. So that was lucky for me. But yeah, I'm a big advocate for playing as many sports as you can at an early age, and I think it definitely, I guess, developed my overall skill set. But I guess the thing that I didn't touch on there before with league as well is, like, I kind of grew up playing. Well, believe it or not, cricket with Jake Trbojevic, who's now playing for the Seagulls.
Yeah, okay.
And then Clint
He was
Gutherson.
a AFL footballer as well, isn't he? Like, he was.
Jake Trbojevic, not Tom.
Oh, sorry, Tom. Yeah, sorry, go on. Yeah.
So the big tackling lock rather than the fast fullback. But I guess played a lot of union with guys like Clint Gutherson as well, who's now the para captain. And we played a lot of league and union together and kind of junior rep teams growing up. So, I mean, where they were always kind of league first and union second, I was probably the other way around. And then we kind of went our separate ways from there. So I guess that Northern Beaches kind of sporting, landscape definitely contributed to a lot of guys kind of going on with it. And we just went our separate ways.
No, for sure. I think that you hear a lot of stories, and we've been lucky enough to speak to a lot of professional sports people across a broad range of sports, and there's a lot of crossover in, like even basketball and Aussie rules football.
Yeah, huge.
And then, I know a lot of the news around, I mean, this time of year it's AFL draft is, I think, in the next couple of days. And there's always talk about the kids that are choosing footy over cricket, or, the ones that got away that have chosen cricket or soccer instead. And, they could have been superstars. So it is an interesting time of year to hear. And yeah, there's always going to be that crossover, I think.
It's a hard decision to imagine coming from a position of never having a shot at playing any elite sport. I can't imagine, like, we kind of talk about this, I guess, as far as like a career trajectory goes, where it's like, asking a 16-year-old kid to like start thinking about what they want to do for the rest of their life is such a tricky thing anyway. If it's like just, your average kid in high school.
Picking your subjects.
Like, it's a huge amount of, I guess, ultimately it doesn't matter quite as much because we now know on the other side of it that life goes on and you can find your way in many different ways. But like, yeah, you sort of getting to that point of, being a young man and having to make a big decision like that. I can only imagine, it must have been a bit of an interesting time. Not to mention with a family full of rugby tragics, probably just like pushing you and so excited for you at the same time as well.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely an interesting time in your life. And I mean, I guess it's worked out for me, but it's always a tough decision at the time.
I'm interested to know, and it's a question we probably haven't asked for a long time enough in terms of, probably because we haven't had a chance to speak to a heap of athletes in recent times, but the dedication to get to the top and to reach your goals is often something that people talk about, but it can be brushed over a little bit in those younger years. So once you made your decision, all right, I'm going to go for union, I'm going to give it a crack. What was the hardest part? Like, looking back at where you are now, looking back there, what was the hardest part in dedicating yourself to that goal?
Look, I think like it's probably not like a massive sacrifice, and I sometimes hate that word when you kind of don't do things because you want to work towards a goal that other people aren't necessarily kind of working towards also. But I think probably just the social life that you kind of miss out on when you're 18, 19. Like for me, I actually didn't drink probably till I was like 19, 20, kind of partly just because I didn't really like it, and partly because I thought it would kind of benefit me over others in terms of like pursuing, I guess, professional sport. But then I guess like the hardest thing sometimes is obviously there's a party on a Friday night and you got early Saturday morning training, and I guess these are the things that now you look back and you're like, I'm 100% glad that I chose the way I did. But at the time, I think it's the biggest thing, the best thing since sliced bread, those kind of parties that you're missing out on. And, trip like boys trips, like all these kind of things where you might have a carnival or a tryout or something like that. So, I mean, that's not like super hard, but they're the things that you kind of think are big when you're that age, and you kind of got to put them aside and work towards a goal. And then I guess the other thing for me is kind of in between sort of 18 and 21, when I kind of ended up moving down and getting my contract with the Rebels and moving down to Melbourne, was I had a kind of sort of 12 to 15 month injury that kind of put me out of playing footy for that kind of period of time, and watching other people who were kind of my age, who I'd kind of grown up competing with, go on to Super Rugby, and they were playing like that top level at kind of 19, 20, and I was sitting there injured. So I guess they're always part and parcel with sport injuries, but it was probably one of the toughest kind of years of my life that, I guess, looking back, probably shaped the person and the player that I am today. But at the time was very tough.
Do you remember what you were sort of telling yourself in that time? Because I can only imagine that you're, like totally aware that this is like, you at, like seeing all your peers, going on and starting their sort of their rugby careers, and you being at that, I guess, that peak sort of age to really get started, and obviously being sidelined by something. Do you remember, like, was there any sort of, particular points in that where you remember now as like maybe as either low points or maybe as either, some sort of sage wisdom and a bit of advice that you might have got in that time that helped as well, like either side of the coin?
I can't really pinpoint too many like particular moments, but I do remember like a couple of guys, like, because I played Aussie 20s in 2013, and traditionally, like, because that was my when I was under 19, so I played my first year, and then my second year was kind of supposed to be in 2014, but I kind of missed that whole year through injury. And I remember, like, at the end of that 20s tournament that I was kind of on the sidelines for, a lot of guys got signed for Super Rugby teams, and that was kind of like the traditional, you're 20 and you play 20s for a couple of years, that's when you get signed. And I was just kind of sitting there just thinking, this could be me. And at the time you think, like, you never really like, I'll get my chance one day. Like, you kind of think it's the be all and end all at the time. So it was tough to watch, but I think, like, I was very grateful to have a lot of good people around me at that time, I guess, pushing me, and both in the gym and with my rehab to kind of get back on the park. And I guess, my mindset was just that I was just going to work hard to get back on the field and give myself every opportunity to get there whenever that kind of transpired. And I was lucky enough that 2015 kind of came back, played club rugby, and had a good year, and got signed off the back of it. So it was probably only a 1 year delay in the end, which was not a bad result, and probably meant that I was a bit more mature when I actually graduated into that professional rugby setup.
Yeah, have that little bit of extra perspective under your belt makes such a big difference.
Maturity is probably the big thing from that as well, in terms, I can imagine it would have been quite easy to sit back and, you get the hindsight of going like, oh man, I'm better than that guy. Like, if I was playing, I would have been, like, I'd be taking the piss out of him. You get in those positions, and I think it's only natural anyway when you're missing out on something to start talking negative on other people that are getting the opportunities and getting that success and recognition. So I can only imagine, like, the lessons for yourself to learn and get that maturity through that experience. It absolutely would have benefited across the board in terms of them when you were back in 2015 playing club footy. And I know for me, I would be sitting there going like, fuck that guy. I wouldn't. I'm impressed. I'm impressed. 2015. So on the back of good year, get picked up by the Rebels. And make the journey down to Melbourne to get your professional career off and rolling. And it was probably a pretty impressive first handful of months, because I think from looking into your sort of career and whatnot over the last couple of weeks, that you were called up to the Wallabies pretty quickly. So what was that experience like in terms of getting signed, moving to Melbourne, starting your professional journey, and then getting this recognition from the national team quite quickly?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to use too many cliches, but it was a massive whirlwind that kind of first sort of 12 months. I kind of moved down in November, and it was like the first time living out of home. And, I was lucky enough that I had a mate from Manly who was moving down at the same time, not for rugby, but for another job. So I kind of lived with him and his girlfriend for the first 18 months. And that kind of eased me into my first time out of home. And, I was just thinking, I think the whole time, the first few months, I know it was very tough training, but I was just kind of thinking, how good is this? Like I'm getting paid. Obviously wouldn't have been much at the time, but I'm getting paid to go to the gym and train, all day, every day. And it was just an awesome experience. And I guess really looking back, I'm really grateful for Tony McGann, who was the coach at the Rebels at the time. Just kind of, he must have seen something in me from preseason. I kind of managed to keep my body in really good shape. I guess the first sort of 3 or 4 months that I was there, I didn't really miss a session through injury. And, I got a lot of time to kind of upskill on the field, and then ended up making my debut in round 1. I think I was supposed to play wing. So I guess I'll probably touch on it now, but I grew up playing number 10, like my whole kind of junior career, a little bit of 15, I guess, as you do when, you're one of the better players in your teams growing up. You usually get stuck in one of those positions. And then I still remember in 2015, played a bit of 12, a little bit of 15, and then like maybe 5 minutes off the bench at 13. I still remember the Rebels saying like to my manager, can Reece play 13? Like we're looking for someone who can cover the centers as well. He's like, yeah, he's played there plenty. As all good managers do, obviously. And then like I don't think I'd ever played on the wing in my life at that point. And then kind of trained a lot at 15, a bit at center during that preseason. And then I guess the trend these days in rugby teams is like you try and find your best 7 backs to put on the field, I guess, rather than like pigeonholing guys into positions. And so I remember for my debut, like I was picked to start on the wing. And then one of the boys got sick the night before, so our fullback moved to 10. I moved to 15. Then in the warm-up, our 10 did his quad, so played about 10 minutes of the game, and I played a bit of 10, bit of 15, bit of center in that first game. And it was I still like, I remember it pretty clearly, but it was just kind of, wow, like I don't know what the hell's just going on. But then I guess had a decent start to that Super Rugby season. And then kind of it's funny how things work in terms of like, injury and timing and stuff like that, because one of the other boys, Mark Harris, had been picked in the Wallabies squad for June. And in our last game before that camp, I think we were playing on the Sunday, and the boys are going into camp on the Sunday night. He made a break, set me up, drew and passed the fullback for a try, and did his hammy in the meantime, and kind of got ruled out. And then I ended up getting a call from the Wallabies manager on the field straight after the game saying, can you come into camp tonight? And my roommate at the time, I had to call him straight after the game, and he was at home, so he packed a bag for me quickly and just headed straight to the airport with the boys after the game. And that was kind of that night was my first experience of Wallabies camp. And I was in camp for a couple of months, and then ended up making my debut. I think it was the day after my 22nd birthday in New Zealand. So, and then went on to play 10 test matches that first year, and went on my first spring tour. And it was just, looking back, things couldn't have fallen in place better for me that year after, obviously a tough kind of 2014 and start of 2015. So, it's funny how things work out, but very grateful for, I guess, the way things panned out for me in that year.
Crazy. Whirlwind was a good word to describe.
It's a crazy trajectory in like what is a pretty short amount of time, like professionally speaking. That's so crazy. I'm wondering for your first game out, if it's like, especially being on your birthday as well. And so were you playing New Zealand? Is that what you said?
Yeah, I played New Zealand over
Yeah. Did they just come looking for you in your first game?
No, well, I came off the bench,
Okay.
and I still remember that as well. Like I kind of was hoping for 5 minutes at the end of the game or something like that. And Adam Ashley Cooper actually got a head knock like 20 minutes in, and all of a sudden I was kind of on the field. And so I mean, I don't even think they would have like done, anything. It wouldn't even known who I was, or, would have been some new kids on the bench. So I kind of probably just didn't even have time to think about it and didn't have time to get targeted. I was just kind of straight on there. And looking back, it's probably the best way that things could have worked out, even though it was obviously no good for Swoop. It was kind of a good way to make your debut.
What's that? I guess. What was the feeling like? You mentioned you remember coming off the bench, but the Wallabies is arguably the biggest sporting national team. Out of arguably there's the Aussie Ashes cricket team, I suppose, as well. But the Wallabies, everyone knows the Wallabies, and like having that moment where the coach or the manager has turned around and gone, "Yep, get ready, you're on, you're going." Yeah. What was that initial like, oh shit, like, all right, we're on? Or were you just like in the moment, you're ready to go?
At the time, I don't know. I can't like remember vividly, but I mean, I'm very like, I watched the details quite closely when I'm on the bench. And I remember seeing Swoop go down and I was kind of like, is he going to get up? And I was like, could be on here. And then obviously the manager kind of turns around and, like, go on like, now. And he's like, yeah, obviously get out there. He's coming off. So yeah, you have no time to think. And like the guys are obviously very welcoming and supportive out on the field straight away, just, kind of telling me to back myself. And I mean, I didn't do anything, I don't think, outstanding in that first game. I actually kicked a penalty goal. So I had my first points in that first game, which was a good feeling. But I mean, I guess if you don't stand out on debut, it's probably a good thing. So yeah, I mean, I was obviously just stoked to get one test, and then to end the year with 10 was awesome. Yeah.
One thing I want to, in terms of the trajectory that you were speaking about, Muff, and being signed to the Melbourne Rebels, obviously, like we said earlier, Union is probably not the biggest fan base in Melbourne. It's a very northern game for Australia, I suppose. New South Wales, Queensland, huge fan bases up there. So being recruited by the Rebels, what was the feeling like, getting drafted or getting recruited to a place that you can kind of almost, I guess, fly under the radar a little bit in terms of media and probably fan recognition. Whereas I suppose up in, New South Wales, Queensland, if you're playing, people know who you are straight away, sort of thing. I think maybe arguably similar for people getting drafted to the AFL in Melbourne versus being recruited in the northern states as well. So yeah, what was that experience like? Do you think that helped, being recruited in a place like Melbourne where you could sort of, find your feet, do your thing and build into it?
I guess at the time when you kind of signed the contract and I guess head down originally, you're not really thinking about that kind of stuff. And I was just stoked to, whether it was a contract at the Waratahs or the Rebels or, the Brumbies, it kind of worked out the best for me. It was the best offer to come down to Melbourne, and probably didn't really think about that at the time. But I guess now, like having, been down there 6 years, and I guess, having this conversation with both rugby players in Sydney and Brisbane, and I guess experience it myself in both Sydney and Brisbane. And then also, as you kind of mentioned, talking to AFL players up in Sydney and in Brizzy and stuff like that compared to Melbourne, I actually love it. I mean, there's the odd Rebels fan, or you see an odd Rebels jumper, maybe Bayside or something like that, once a month or something like that. But, I actually really enjoy it. I mean, I'm not massive or anything like that, obviously, but for someone like Buddy Franklin, I know one of the Swans S&Cs, and he's saying he can't even leave the hotel in Melbourne without kind of getting pestered or something like that. So I mean, obviously I'm on a way lesser scale than that, but to be able to just kind of go out in Melbourne, walk the streets and go to cafes and have no one know who you are is it's probably worked out really well, I guess, in the long term, and probably kept me down in Melbourne. I think, it's nice to have people who support rugby, especially up here on Northern Beaches in Sydney, and, in Brizzy, they love it as well. It's nice to, have people come up to you and want to talk about the game and, wish you well and, tell you either how well you're doing or how poorly you're doing. It's sometimes, a lot nicer down in Melbourne to just be able to fade in and, tell people when there's a big group of us rugby players making noise that we're a VFL team or something like that. Just
yeah, Frankston Dolphins. Just send all your emails to the managers at Frankston Dolphins, mate.
No, good call. I don't mind that. That's good gear. Yeah, it's interesting. So, so your first year in the Wallabies, played 10 tests, and now I think you're up to over 50 odd now as well. So maybe 54-ish.
That's about right.
Pretty impressive that you've been able, I guess, to get to that level and then maintain that consistency in your international football. So is it something that you expected early days, or are you sort of surprised constantly at how well or how regularly you can maintain that consistency?
Yeah, I think you never expect to play that many tests, and I mean, hopefully that's not the end of it for me. Hopefully I can still keep pushing up, more, and not just playing but contributing also. But I still remember, like, kind of when I was starting out, I don't know if this was maybe seen as arrogant or even like speculative when I was kind of first starting, but I still remember like my first year saying that, no disrespect to guys who only play a handful of tests, but I wanted to be someone who, played 50 plus times for their country and, be able to contribute to some good performances and, good results over the season. So, I mean, I wouldn't say look back now, but to be at the point that I am now and to have over 50 tests for my country is, I mean, I'm sure I'll look back in 10, 20 years and, really be proud of, the career that I've been able to have. But I think there's so much more for Australian rugby to do, to improve on, and to, I guess, inspire the next generation of not only rugby players, but athletes to want to grow up and put that Wallabies jersey on. And I really want to be a part of, having that positive impact on the sporting community and the rugby community. So, I mean, I can't really say that we've achieved that much as a team, if we're being honest. Like, we've kind of, apart from the 2015 World Cup that I wasn't a part of, I didn't start till 2016. Like, we haven't really won too much. And I guess ultimately when you win is when you inspire young kids to want to pull on that jersey. So I know for me, growing up watching the golden era of Australian rugby, which was like, late 90s and early 2000s, like seeing them win so often is what made me kind of want to grow up and be a Wallaby. And I think a lot of the current players are on the same page, that we want to be able to inspire, kids who at the moment might want to watch NRL and play for the Storm to, one day play for the Rebels and go on that pathway and be Wallabies. So, I mean, there's a lot more for us as players and custodians of the jersey to achieve in the future.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a little bit of reverie in this, and there's quite a lot of I guess honor bestowed on people that that get to don the green and gold across codes, and it's such a big thing, and you obviously have a lot of respect for it, which we can hear in how you're talking about it, which is really awesome. Like, it's so great to hear. I want to jump back to your sort of more personal, like what you were saying before about what you were hoping to achieve on a personal level. And you make such an interesting point, because you kind of presented it in a bit of a guarded way, saying that, I don't want to come across as arrogant, and I don't want to come across as like naysaying anybody else. And it's something that we've been talking a lot about in the last few conversations, is that the like tall poppy syndrome, I guess, is effectively what it is. And it's such an interesting dynamic, and obviously so prevalent in sport that you've sort of, I think a lot of people across, elite sport feel like they can't. I mean, everything that you said before was not arrogant, and it wasn't, to downplay anybody else's achievements. It's literally you just like saying what you want to achieve yourself. And like, that's great. I mean, you want to achieve that for your country. It's not for your own glory. It's for, to be able to, as you said, being a custodian of the green and gold. So yeah, I'm interested if that what's your experience been with that to date, obviously, now that you're into your career? And is it something that you have felt yourself have to be guarded about, like about ambition and your aspirations a little bit?
Yeah, look, I think the media's got such an important role to play in our game. I just think, like, these days, like, if you say one thing out of order, or the way someone might perceive it, is talking yourself up or talking a team up, or, even headlines these days. I feel like the media is very good at grabbing little aspects of an article or an interview and turning it, whether it's a positive or a negative, into clickbait. And I feel like sometimes you need to preface comments like that with what I just did to not be, I mean, as bad as it sounds, like it's so easy to just get caught out and get yourself in a situation that you don't want to be in. So, I mean, unfortunately, that's the way it is these days, and it's part and parcel of, whether it's a podcast, someone listening to this might be someone who's in the media and decide that it's a good article to write about if I just said, want to play 50 tests, and I feel they might portray it as me saying I'm better than the people that have played 3 tests. And I mean, unfortunately, it's just something that you've kind of got to do when you're talking in these, whether it's an interview or podcast or to the media.
Now, look, and that's a fair enough answer, man, 100%. And I can only imagine how frustrating that would be, because, there's so few, I just feel like, people on their career trajectories, which is what this is, this is your job, it's your vocation, it's what you're doing for your life. And there's just not that many people that have to like asterisk everything, It's so many other like worlds that people aren't held to this, or aren't worried about, like, how what they're saying will be perceived, and rightfully so, obviously. Like you're totally spot on about, the media being able to sort of twist and turn whatever's said into whatever they want. So it's a tricky thing to navigate. And it's something that, in speaking to a handful of people through the podcast, they've like talk about, especially when they were younger, how hard that really was. Because all of a sudden, going from being a kid, or, still being a kid, but then having to be very calculated about how you present yourself, maybe, a lot more so than most 18-year-olds would, is I can only imagine that's a pretty steep learning curve. So is that something that you sort of got, was there assistance like through the club in that sort of thing, like as far as the media and all that stuff goes?
I think it's probably a combination of, the media managers kind of, I guess, guiding you through it in your early stages. But then also, I guess, just personal experience and learning on the run. So I know for me, like my first couple of years, I probably look back on interviews and be like face palming. But
mate, we do it every week.
No, I think it's more just you kind of get a feel for what to say and what not to say. And I mean, like I've seen actually a couple of teammates this year get caught out by headlines and clickbait on things that didn't even like begin to touch on what the point of the interview or the point of the answer was, but generated them an article and a headline. And I just I mean, as I said, the media is definitely an important part of our game and generating interest and getting kids excited about, playing rugby, whether it's for Australia or Melbourne or whatever. But I think we can be so much better in, I guess, creating a more positive vibe around the game and, taking athletes as people, in terms of, even if they slip up on a word or, slip up in an interview, having the relationships with players and teams to be like, I know you said this, but what did you actually mean by it? Begin to understand, the actual person behind the athlete, rather than seeing it as a chance to expose what was a flaw in the interview.
No, big time. I think it's something, well said, yeah. I think it's something that has been really important for you and I, Muff, and when we have these conversations, we always sort of preface the fact that we're not journalists, so we're not, looking for the scoops or looking for the behind the scenes stories that's going to get someone in trouble, or, we are trying to, I guess, podcasts are a media outlet as well, and we're trying to just get the real story and the real world life behind the scenes, I guess, of each person we speak to. And I think it's something that we've been really, I guess, strict with ourselves in is making sure that we don't fall in the traps of, if someone reaches out and goes, oh, hey, have you spoken to so and so, did they say anything interesting? We want to make sure that we're doing right by the human being behind the interview, not the image of the athlete or the actor or the musician.
And especially because we want to make conversations about mental health easier as well. And that's like, you don't achieve that by making people feel like they need to be guarded in a conversation. So I can fully appreciate what you're saying, man. It's like, And yeah, you just hope that there is a little bit of a shift somewhere where it becomes, where like, I mean, you kind of said it really well, just a more positive relationship with athletes and understanding the people behind them is, that's exactly it, man. And a good opportunity for us, to do that here. So yeah, that's awesome.
Oh, appreciate it.
No, we might, I might try and steer the conversation, if you're willing, Reece, a bit away from the football world and into the personal world of yourself, mate. And like Michael just touched on, the underlying factor, or the thing we put the most emphasis on is men talking about mental health and being able to speak freely and openly and honestly about any issues that we as men might face, and trying to rid that stigma of hiding and being a real manly, tough, walls up kind of character. And something I guess I've already picked up on with you is your willingness to share and to speak freely. And I'm really interested to know, I guess maybe a good place to start might be your thoughts on men speaking up and seeking professional help, whether it be, a lot of the time in a football world, it's injury or performance based, but we've learnt a lot over the last couple of years in terms of the other side of the coin at a football club, in terms of the doctors and the psychologists, or all the other stuff that goes on behind the scenes that as fans and supporters you don't really hear of. So I'm interested to know what your experiences have been as a person in a club, in terms of what is on offer at the club for you. And then if you're willing to share whether you utilize any of these services, like a psychologist or a GP, to talk openly about things that are going on with yourself.
I guess rugby's really improved, I guess, in this space over the past few years. So I know, like, when I first started out, we've always had like a Rugby Union Players Association employee, like a welfare officer, that's been full-time at the club. So when I first started out, like, great bloke, was really good with helping, like, I guess, make my move down to Melbourne easier and my transition into the club. And he was a really good guy to have around, and I guess making life easier in all facets. And then kind of, I think after the first couple of years, he moved on and we had another lady start, and she was great around that side of things as well, like helping out with uni, any extracurricular stuff. And then I think she ended up leaving after a couple of years, and now we've got like another welfare officer who's, I think, been really good in driving the mental health side of things and checking in and all these kind of programs that are, I guess, making guys feel more comfortable with, speaking up about how they're feeling, I guess, whether they're stressed, whether they're anxious, all those types of things. And I know for me personally, like, I can't sit here and say that I've ever kind of gone to a sports psych or a GP and actually talked, I guess, officially about the way that I'm feeling. And I think that's probably more a reflection on the fact that, I guess, aside from a couple of injuries that I usually deal with quite well, I've had a pretty, like, I wouldn't say rough, life compared to a lot of other people around the club. My family's always been relatively stable. I've been lucky enough to spend a lot of time on the field. I haven't had too many injuries over the past 5-6 years, and genuinely have, loved life and been in a good space with my mental well-being. But I think the one thing for me that sticks out around a footy club is the kind of unofficial and indirect conversations that you have that really help your well-being. So I know for me, whether that's, I've lived on my own for the past few years, kind of initially down at the club, lived with a couple of the young boys, and really enjoyed that, but kind of got sick of their grubbiness, so moved out and moved on to my own. And I know for me, like, even if I'm ever feeling lonely or isolated or anything like that, I think it's just as easy as messaging in the group chat and asking a couple of boys if they want to go for a coffee or lunch or dinner or whatever. And I know for me that makes a huge difference, just to have people around and just have casual chats and casual catch-ups. And maybe after 30 minutes of having coffee with someone, they might feel comfortable enough to actually share the way that they're feeling. They might start off with, "How you going?" And like, "Yeah, good, mate. What's going on?" And then you catch up on maybe you speak for 15 minutes about what's going on, and then all of a sudden he goes, actually, no, like I'm struggling with this, and you can kind of help each other, through those indirect chats. And I think they're the real important ones. Just spending time with someone, I guess, getting a gauge for the vibes that they're giving off, and, the way that they're kind of acting and interacting, whether it's around the club, out in the field, or even away from the field. And I guess being able to pick up any changes in each other's behaviors or actions, and I guess having that real good support network of, whether it's 30 or 40 other guys or even a staff member, to be able to pick up on, the ebbs and flows in guys' kind of well-being.
I think you hit the nail on the head, mate. And the motto of this show is the little conversations can make the biggest differences, and those indirect conversations, which is how we, I guess, started our,
100%.
Our relationship in terms of on the deeper level. You're absolutely right. Those little, you think it might be an insignificant "how are you," but it can often be the hardest question to answer, because if someone's got something weighing on their shoulders, of course, that, the stereotype, the stigma of a male is to go, "Yep, good mate, cool, how are you?"
Yeah.
But if you ask that question to someone and they do that walls up response and ask about you, and you can tell that there's something off, even by you just going, "Oh, I've had a rough day," that opens the wall for them to go, "Oh, you're right. Oh, yeah, actually, yeah, you know what? I am struggling." And
yeah,
I think one thing that I want to, I guess, ask you on that is what your image of, I guess, yourself or your role in those conversations is. Like, do you see yourself as someone that the guys at the club can reach out to quite freely and, have a coffee with? And, do you see yourself as someone that if you're catching up with one of the guys, that they can speak to you freely?
Yeah, I think, like, I probably have a close group of 4 or 5 mates within the team, but then the nature of, like, I've always loved the fact about, like, the Rebels, the culture down there is that, like, unless maybe there's an 18-year-old and he doesn't quite feel comfortable, saying, like, let's go for a coffee or something like that, I would say, like, at least 20 to 30 of the guys in the squad would feel comfortable going for coffee one-on-one with, like, the other 30 guys. And that's, Polynesians, white guys, Kiwis, South Africans, Japanese. Like, it doesn't really matter where you come from. I guess guys are always going to gravitate to people that they've grown up with, or they know a little bit more and on a deeper level. But I think the great thing about a footy club and a footy team is, because you spend so much time together, like, you're always comfortable, going for, whether it's coffee or dinner or just even a chat, or, walking to the train station or whatever it is, going for a swim, doing recovery. And you might find yourself in an ice bath with a 21-year-old who you haven't really spent much time with, and you can kind of get to know them, and that makes them more comfortable to then ask you out for coffee if they're not doing anything, or, you're nearby. So, I'd like to think that I'm approachable, and I guess being one of the kind of more experienced and older guys now in the squad, I probably definitely want to be seen that way. As, whilst I know when I was coming through, the Wallabies guys didn't come back till January of pre-season, and, we've been there for 2 months before that, the new guys, and they come in January, like, oh, wow, like, that's, Sean McMahon at the time, or I don't know, whoever it was kind of, like, pretty daunting. But I hope it might take a little bit of time, but over the next sort of, January, February, March, even if it takes that long, I hope that maybe an 18-year-old kid who's fresh in the squad can, feel comfortable in sending me a message, and whether it's asking me about something on the field or even just, asking me out for coffee. I think that's the really good thing about rugby teams and the culture down at the Rebels in general.
I like that you come back to the coffees, because, it sounds like, like in this space, and, like, for anybody managing their sort of mental health and how they're tracking on a day-to-day basis, and what we've found to be so true is that you just got to, like, find what works for you, like, there's not necessarily, like you said, if you've not felt the need to see, a psychologist or seek professional help inside or outside of sport, like, there's nothing wrong with that at all. But it's like, you found something that works for you. And, like, that's the battle, that's the battle one, is knowing what works for you. And it'll change over time. Like, like Liam and I, at similar sort of times, found ourselves, enlisting the help of professionals, and like it's been a life-changing thing for me, I know, and I'm like super proud of the fact that we can have these open conversations about it now, and I don't feel an ounce of guilt or embarrassment or anything attached to it. So yeah, it is. I always like pointing out the fact that if you find what works for you, then that's great, and that's it. Like you've done the hard work. So yeah, it's awesome, man.
Yeah.
I guess along those lines, you talked about so like finding what works for you and the support that you do have, and finding that in different areas. You mentioned earlier in the chat, even especially when you were younger as well, about having like great people around you. And I'm interested, I guess, sort of outside of the rugby world and outside of your your sort of career world, like what's your support network like, and where do you lean when you need to, and yeah, how does that part of your life sort of balance?
Look, I've always kind of been very close to mum and dad, and they're always just a phone call, or a text message away. I don't really tend to lean on them too much, and I'd probably say it again. Like I've been so grateful that I haven't really ever been in like extended ruts with my mental well-being. So like, you feel sorry for yourself when you get injured, and you might have a tough week or two, but I feel like I really try and just flip that mindset in terms of what I can do rather than what I can't do. And I feel like for me, rehab from injury has usually gone pretty smoothly, just I guess by flipping the switch on I guess how I approach it and how I think about it. Whether it's a lower body injury, it's a good chance to work on uppers, get some beach weights in, and vice versa. For me at the moment with a shoulder, it's a good chance for me to work on my chicken legs and put some there. But yeah, I've always been grateful for kind of my mental well-being on a whole. But I know for me, like I've got so many close mates from cricket and rugby growing up that aren't playing at the professional level that I'm still really close with, and also schoolmates coming back here, and they're always good at dragging me down when things are going well, and then also building me up when I'm in a tough spot like I am at the moment. Like, they're very quick to tell me when I miss a goal, or when things are going well, to stay humble. And then also they've been around the last few weeks when I've been bored, haven't been able to do as much, and just sitting down having a coffee and going for a yarn, going for a walk or stuff like that. So I really lean on my friends massively. But I guess the other thing that I probably mentioned earlier is, and I think I'm a big advocate for kind of everyone knowing what works for them. But I know for me, like I don't actually have to be around people 24/7. If I'm feeling bad, I know for me that like being next to the ocean or the water really calms me and makes me kind of, I don't know, it just makes me feel good, kind of does something to my soul. And I know like I probably don't know if how I'd go living in the UK for an extended period or something like that. That's kind of so far away from the water. But I know like sometimes I'll just crave an ocean swim, like whether it's the middle of winter in Melbourne, like I'll just go get in the water and I just immediately feel better. So I think like, whether it's the ocean or, it's going for a walk in the park or reading your book in the botanical gardens or having a picnic or something like that. I just think like I'm a massive advocate for whether it's with people or even just a bit of an alone time. I think finding what works for you and finding what I guess helps you out of tougher periods is pretty important also.
Very well balanced individual, Reece Hodge. I love it.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned those things, but you don't justify why as well. Like you don't, when you find something that works for you, you don't have to sit there and go like, I'm doing this, but I don't see a psychologist because X, Y, Z. Like, you know what works for you and you stick to your guns. And I think that's a really important skill to have is to not fall into the trap of letting other people push you or prod you towards another direction. And yeah, I think you're absolutely right. There's so many opportunities, and you mentioned it straight off the bat at the start of the conversation that you were really happy to be back up in the Northern Beaches and close to the water and your family and friends. So it's obviously something that works for you. You mentioned that you go up there when you're feeling down as well. So yeah, I mean, hats off to you. It's good to know what you need to do.
Yeah, for sure.
And also hats off again for a winter Melbourne dip, because we did it this Melbourne and they suck.
You say we did it, like you did 100 days in a row. That was a good effort, I would say.
100 days to what month? Because that's very impressive.
We did.
Kicked off in July.
Yeah.
Wow.
100 days, 10 minutes up to the neck. I didn't make all 100, just to fully put that out there, right?
Mate, you know what? I'll put it. You had one little day off, and I will give you the rest.
Yeah,
because
but
you
the
came
streak's
with
ruined.
you
You know,
came
that
with me
one
for the
day
rest
just
of the
ruined the
night.
streak, and I was like, no, I can't say. It's like, you know, it's like playing 99 games and then getting the 100 game belt.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's not happening. I can't do it. Can't claim it.
That is very impressive, though.
we got there, and I think it only really stopped because of the water quality, because of all the rain we've had. But
Yeah, exactly.
I don't feel the need to go as often anymore, which is nice.
Yeah, that's it.
No, it's good. I mean, the ocean is for me, it's something that especially this year, I know I had a few, down patches through the last couple of months, and having the consistency to get up and go to the beach every morning with Muff and another mate, Jack, and we just that first 15 minutes of the day up in the water and just having these little conversations and picking up the good vibes from your mates really, really helps me. I know you've mentioned it, you loved it, and we both, I guess, have spoken about, we've stopped doing it recently, and we've felt the rut come back and the bad habits come back, and I guess we trying to keep accountable and say, like, it works so well for us, why aren't we doing that still? So I'm interested to know on your side of things, Reece, if there's anything you do daily or routinely that you do for a reason to keep yourself on top of things.
Yeah, so I've got one like massive thing for me that I was actually going to mention before is I usually stretch for probably like 45 minutes before bed, like every night.
Oh, huge. Your physio must be the happiest physio in the world.
We actually started out back in 2013 or 2014 when I had that big injury, and I was like, this is a chance to kind of work on my mobility. Like I'd always been that like kind of tall, lanky kid, and I was always stiff and never flexible, and I kind of started it to work on that. And then it kind of evolved like over the next couple of years for me is like, it's almost like a sleeping pill for me now. Like I'll do it, like kind of get the piss taken out of me when I room with people on tour, because they're like, what the fuck's this guy doing? Like I actually kind of sit there, like usually like try and make the room as dark as possible and turn off my phone, or not turn it off, but like dim my phone completely down and try and put it away and not really touch it, and just have like sort of 30 minutes of like breathing and just kind of slow static hold stretching. And it's like some alone time for me at the end of the day. For one thing, obviously it's good for my body. I feel great for the next day of training. It's like my preparation. And then, usually when my head hits the pillow, I'm pretty much out straight away. So it's just something that I've kind of found over the years is like been really good for me, both mentally and physically, and, helps my sleep, helps me like prepare for the next day of training. And, it works for me, and it's something that I probably do. We're talking about breaking the streak. Like I usually in season, I won't do it like after a game night. So I'll do it 6 days a week, and then like usually kind of get back from a game and, have a bit of a treat food wise, and then just kind of, sit in, whether it's play cards or sit in bed and watch a movie or whatever. So I give myself game night off, but yeah, pretty much every other night of the week, I'll do at least sort of 20, 30 minutes plus before I go to sleep. So that's a big routine thing for me.
That's so good. That is such a good habit to have.
do you have like a routine stretch, or do you sort of just whatever, if you feel a niggle, you're like, all right, I'm going to focus on the legs today? Or
no, I have a pretty like set routine, but it's kind of adapts based on injury. So at the moment I can't do like a few of the stretches with my shoulder, but I kind of adjust them as I go, and kind of trying to find ways to do like this glute stretch that I do at the moment without like having to use my arms, but struggling through it. But no, I've got
what the roommates are for, right?
There are too busy in the light. I'm in the dark.
Put the doona cover up between your half of the room. No, that's awesome, mate. I'm really, really pleased that I guess maybe not please. I don't know. I'm really humbled at how generous you've been with your time and, diving into the things that worked for you and being really open and not hesitant in saying the things that work for you. And I think it's something that you should be proud of, the fact that you're able to have these conversations. And, we met a handful of, an hour ago and we're talking about things that you do behind closed doors, mate. So it's been a really nice conversation to have with you, mate. Muff, is there any?
No, I'm good, bro.
Question? Yeah. One I want to, I guess, back on maybe both football side of things and personal side of things, and it's a little bit about, I guess, like with the benefit of hindsight and where you are in your career now and all the experiences you've had with your career and your personal life along the last, 6-7 years. Is there anything you know now that you wish you knew day one?
There is, but I don't really, I don't have any regrets for not knowing it, because I feel like I would never have discovered the things that I have without actually going through the experiences. So I've actually listened to a few podcasts lately, like in my kind of first week or two after surgery, when I couldn't really do much. I was doing a lot of walking and a lot of podcast listening, and listened to one with Dan Carter, who's obviously kind of one of the greatest rugby players who's kind of ever played. And then a couple with like guys like Frank Lampard, who used to play for Chelsea and is now a manager over there and stuff. And they've given very similar answers. And I kind of have been thinking while I've been listening, I'm like, I actually kind of feel the same way. I don't really want to go back and wish when I was 18 that I knew the things I know now, because I'm so grateful for the things that I've gone through that have built resilience and the experience that I've had that have got me to this point. And I feel like there's so much growth still to be had, over the next couple of decades. So that's another diplomatic answer for you.
That's pretty spot on, I think. Have you been on the podcast bandwagon for a while? Have you been a bit of an avid listener over the years? You got any favorites?
I go through phases, but one that I've discovered recently is the High Performance podcast. I'm not sure if you've listened to it, but it's got a lot of very interesting business people, sports people, and I've actually been pretty hooked on that, I guess, with a lot of walking as well. So there's a lot to take out of a lot of the episodes in very different ways. So if you get a chance to have a listen, I'd definitely recommend it.
Yeah, for sure.
Add it to the list. Oh, the list is long.
The other one, I should probably give a couple of my mates a little shout out here as well. They started a podcast called The Short Side. It's a couple of my mates who think they're a lot better at rugby than they actually are, but it's called The Short Side. So I'll give them a little shout out there as well.
Yeah, 100%. We love it.
Big shout out. No, I actually know, if you're filling your time with podcasts at the moment, there's this really fantastic new show called Women of Words, which has just launched recently.
Oh, yeah?
Hosted by these two guys.
Two flops. Hosted by two flops.
No, I'm just kidding. We love podcasting. It's something that you probably listen to tenfold the amount of podcasts that I do. It's something that I really think I should do more of, because I take so much more out of listening to people than I do probably reading and researching about things. Yeah, that makes sense.
Oh, it's like you're saying, Reece. I love like the walk and listen. It's like you just feel like you're doubling up on two things that you should be doing. Like you're just learning so much while you're out, getting your 45 minutes of cardio in. It's like, it's just a win-win. So all for it.
100%.
Reece, we'll start to round out the conversation, mate, and I'm going to throw you in the hot seat if we haven't already. And something we love to do on the show is a bit of a challenge to our guests. And I don't know, I'm sure you probably hopefully read it in the prep doc and you probably know what's coming, but we did some, I guess we got inspired by these guys at the Resilience Project. I'm not sure if you've heard of them. So Hugh Van Kylenberg and Martin Heppel, and Martin does this really amazing thing, and he calls his mates every couple of days and just tells them he loves them and why he loves them, and gives them a bit of a blast over the phone, and then hangs up and doesn't give them a chance to come back at him, essentially. We used to get you to pick up we used to get our guests to pick up the phone and call. I don't know if you're on your phone at the moment with this recording or not, but if you are, I'd love to throw the challenge to you to either give a phone call to a mate and tell him that you love him, or to just give a 30-second sort of shout out here and now to a mate. And yeah, as you know, it's obviously something we don't, as men, do very well and very often. And yeah, I'd love to throw the gauntlet down to you, mate, and see if it's something you'd be willing to do.
Yeah, I actually had a bit of a chuckle when you sent through the prep doc when I saw it, because I'd actually probably a couple of days ago before you sent that through. As I said earlier, I'm moving house at the moment down in Melbourne, and I'm moving in with a mate actually, and he's been doing a lot of the legwork down there at the moment. He's had a lot of a rough time lately. He's also plays at the Rebels, and he had ACL surgery about 3 months ago. Was kind of almost getting picked for the Wallabies, was in the Wallabies squad, and then had an injury, and then this last injury as well. He's just had surgery. His name is Josh, and he's been doing a lot of the legwork down there in Melbourne with our move, going and seeing the place, inspecting it, dealing with the agent. And I actually, called him a couple of days ago and just basically said, like, I really appreciate, all the hard work that you're doing down there. He's just started seeing it. He's started a new relationship as well, so he's got a nice support network down there, and just said, like, I'm so happy for you, the place that you're in at the moment. Like, you obviously had a rough 6 months, and really happy that you're kind of, coming out of it, and just want to say I really appreciate all the hard work that you've done on the place, and looking forward to living with you, and love you, bro. So that was kind of my take on the whole thing. I'm not sure if that's enough, or you actually want me to do something different, but I was kind of, had a little chuckle, because it's probably the first time in a little while that I've actually, sent someone a message or given them a call and said something like that, because a lot of people have helped me over the past few weeks, especially being an invalid. It felt great doing that, and he obviously really appreciated the call as well. So I think it's very powerful and something that us as men should do more of.
No, I think that's perfect, mate. And the spiel back, and it's being recorded now, so you can chop this and just send it to John, like just put it on the loudspeaker, or put it on the Bluetooth stereo around the house here and there, and just remind him of the love that you're sending his way. And I think that'd be an interesting house move to watch, with the two of you, with a crook ACL and a crook pec moving houses. Fun.
Yeah, he's actually just found out he's got to go back in and get a little clean out of scar tissue on Thursday as well. So I'll probably be looking after him with things he needs his legs for, and he'll look after me with things I need my arm for. So yeah, sure, it'll work out.
Beneficial relationships. No, that's awesome, mate. And very well said. So thank you for sharing that. We probably manifested it without knowing that.
Yeah, that's
it was coming. And
exactly.
The person that's done their homework early. I love that. That's awesome.
Bingo. Well done. Muff.
We're here. Done.
Yeah.
Pointy ends.
Big time. Last thing, Reece. I just yelled. That was very intrusive. I apologize. That hurt my ears. Last thing we'd love to ask you, Reece, is, I guess, if you were given the opportunity to sit down with someone and have a conversation like this and learn about the person behind the image, I suppose, who would you like to hear have a conversation like this? For me, it's the classic MJ, Michael Jordan. I'd love to sit down and hear his backstory. I don't know, who would you say, maybe?
Oh, man, you got your Obamas, you got the
Beyonces,
you got, anyone. You could go so big. But then also a random inclusion. I just met walking our mate's dog today, or a couple of days ago, met this old fella named Don who lives in York Street. Super keen to know his backstory. I reckon we'll get him on. So yeah, it can be either end of the spectrum. I'm all for it.
I'm going to go I feel like I know him now that I listen to his podcast, but Dan Carter was always a favorite of mine, players growing up. So I love to kind of pick his brain if I had the chance. But a couple of, I'm a bit of a golf fanatic as well. So one for me would be Tiger. I'd love to sit down and just kind of, I guess, understand on a deeper level the kind of work, the hard work and the sacrifice that went into developing obviously he was a freak from a young age and put so many hours in, and just kind of hearing his take on things would be one that I'd really like to know. And then obviously he's had a lot of kind of ebbs and flows in his life over the past couple of decades as well. So how he's kind of dealt with them, and that comeback at the Masters in 2019 was pretty epic. So I'd love to see how he navigated that period of his life. And then, yeah, I don't know. It's probably the one thing on that document you sent through that I didn't really think about deeply before you actually asked me. So I'm kind of on the spot here, but
That's all right.
yeah, I don't know. I have to have a think and come back to you.
2 great names already, man.
Yeah, huge.
Yeah.
100%.
Did you see the video of Tiger hitting a ball?
Yeah, I did.
That big crash?
Yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Massive. You saw that crash he had? It's just like,
a little while back.
yeah, it's cool. Good to see. No, awesome. Thanks, Reece. We'll throw the invite out Dan Carter's way, and we'll see if we can get him on the show.
Yeah, that's it.
Good luck.
Let him know that that it came from you, and then we'll put out that coffee for you guys. That'd be fun.
Yeah, that'd be sick.
Awesome, Dan. Reece, it's been an absolute pleasure, mate. Absolute pleasure, Muff. You know the drill. I bloody love you. Very, very humbled to be able to sit down and have these conversations with you, mate.
100%, bro. Reece, huge thank you to you, mate. Thanks so much for your time, and appreciate launching into the other side, or all sides of Reece, I guess, and finding out more and more about you. And I mean, just wish you luck with the recovery. Obviously, I know it's such a it can be a drawn out process, but you just you've got the determination and the drive, and seem to be doing a lot of good with the time that you've got, which I guess is kind of all you can really ask for. Hey.
I guess I appreciate you guys having me on, and it's been a great conversation. It's very thought provoking from my point of view as well. So it's been great, and hopefully we can catch up, sometime down the track, and maybe once we've all learned a bit more about ourselves and other people, we can do another one.
Yeah, 100%. That's it. Always up around too.
Absolutely.
Nice one.
Got plenty of time for coffee in January, Reece. So we'll hit you up, and I'll come say good day for a coffee, mate.
Sounds good. All right. Cheers, guys.